So we'll go for the next one.
Okay.
This will be a different video. We know that the handbook has a way of approaching the conscious levels, how to handle yourself to be up all the time. So there's this crosslink that is happening in my head, that is the same states are achieved through food in my experience. In the sense, when I'm completely isolated from the real world. In the real world, the psychological patterns again comes back to the normal state through the system that is happening in the lower states already. But when I'm traveling or when I'm outside the my normal conditions, I feel I'm elevated just normally when I'm taking like a normal food. I mean normal in the sense some raw food or something like that. My question is, let's consider there is someone who's eating a non-veg food which is high on load, which drains your energy, which spiritually is not good, which won't take you to whatever you want to achieve with your day. It makes your day sluggish or whatever. And this guy is reading the handbook. So just because you are psychologically mapping yourself to attain that higher state and you're still feeding yourself with the food that is not just there yet, how does this process go along? How does things will work in this scenario?
Well, actually the handbook solves the problem right at the start, because your objective, the goal right at the beginning, is to love everyone unconditionally, including yourself. Now the everyone doesn't exclude the animals.
Okay.
Right. And truly you can't be a loving being, or pretentious loving being on one side saying that, oh yeah, I love everyone, but then causing this immense amounts of suffering in this planet, and you just cannot reconcile the two. So that problem doesn't really arise, or rather it solves itself. But on the topic of food, and say on the topic of experimenting with different.
I would like to add some other point to the previous thing.
Oh sure.
I mean, like once you say, like I get this other idea, okay, like everyone in the sense, when you add animals, like okay, there is this fruits and trees and plants and things and things and things. Maybe you can say that as everyone can be replaced by everything. In the sense, I can love a watermelon too.
Yeah, sure,
sense.
sure. So on that front, right, it's like there's some idea, at least for me, it's very obvious, which is that I would rather put love in my body than to put suffering in my body. Let me explain. So if you think about fruits, when you eat fruits, what you're doing is, in that moment you're participating in a symbiotic relationship, which is that the tree has designed the flesh of the fruit specifically for you. It's a payment. So that it's inviting you to eat this fruit, and all your sensory information is telling you that, oh, this, like if you look at a mango, like when it's the right time, when it's the mango season, and if you're walking through the jungle as a primate or something like that, you can smell it, the fragrance. And the fragrance itself invites you, even though you cannot see the mango tree, maybe it's around a corner or something. Just by the smell you will go to inspect this place, and then you look at this beautiful fruit. Every part of your body, every sense of your body is telling you to go eat that. You pluck as many as you can, and then while you're still walking around in the jungle, you eat the fruit. The seed itself is just unappealing to you. It's hard, it's not tasty and whatever, and then you just toss it away. But in that moment you have done your job. What you have done is, the tree cannot walk around and then plant its seeds in different places. You have transported the seed from one place to another place. Now alternatively, if you were to think about something like a watermelon, same process. The watermelon is the storehouse of the seeds. Say you crack open the watermelon, you just eat it, and then you're spitting out the seeds, and then maybe some seeds even go through your digestive tract. And then when you're living in the jungle, when you go to another place and then you go poop somewhere, the watermelon plant, a new one, can come out of your poop actually, because the seed can go through. So now in this moment what you're doing is, you're engaging in a symbiotic relationship with the plant. which the plant is actually already doing. Like if you think about the operating mechanism of the plant, it is doing this in many different forms, which is that now if you think of the tree, there are the roots, there are these microorganisms that live on the roots, and then the root network is supported by like a fungi network. Now what the mycelium does, like the fungi inside the soil, they have like much thinner strands than the roots of the tree is capable of having. And with this thinner strands, it covers a much larger surface area and much larger volume inside the soil, and it transports nutrients and minerals from different parts of the soil till the root.
Okay.
At the base of the root, there are these microorganisms which then convert these nutrients and minerals into forms which can be consumed by the tree or the plant.
It's more like they had an exchange inside the soil.
Exactly, right. Now for this job that say the fungi and the microorganisms are performing, what the tree does is it manufactures carbohydrates and feeds it to the microorganisms living on the root, and also to the fungi, which is like transporting things from different places till the root. So the currency of the plant is actually carbohydrates, and then it's basically doing the same thing with you as well. So just the way it is paying the microorganisms on the root, it's paying you as well for the job of transporting the seed in carbohydrates. Now on the other hand, if you were to think about say eating a chicken or something, what you are doing is you are putting this immense amount of suffering in your body, and because what you are what you eat, you are just integrating that into your system. Now think of that cycle where every sense of your body is telling you that that's not what you want, because even if you're walking through a supermarket or even say a market, and then you were to go through a section where there are all these mangoes everywhere, like it's like it smells so nice, and then if you see there's a bunch of grapes somewhere, it looks appetizing, and then maybe you're bargaining with the shop owner, you pluck a few and then you taste it. On the other hand, if you were maybe buying some fish or something, you're never in this position where you take a little piece of that and then you just chew it while you're talking to the owner. That never happens, because your sensory information is telling you that this is not where you want to be. It looks disgusting, it smells horrible, like no matter somebody might consider themselves to be a hardcore carnivore or whatever. But when they're walking through this section where there's like meat hanging, whatever, and it's like all these, the meat section of the market, even to that person who considers himself to be a hardcore non-vegetarian, it smells bad, which is basically a subjective experience. Because if you're not a human, if you were a cat instead, there is nothing appetizing about the mango to you. But when you go through the meat section, everything smells wonderful. Because if I were to take a fish and blend it, throw it on the floor, the cat will still lick the whole floor clean.
Yeah.
And if I were to take that blended fish, put it in the most beautiful container and jar, and put these twirly straw along with something else, you would still find that disgusting and repulsive. So also talking about the suffering is that, think about the chicken living in this horrible condition in these tiny cages and like along with its fellow chicken, and from time to time somebody comes along, grabs the chicken, takes it, chops its head off, and all the other chicken are watching this happening. So obviously this chickens are living in this highly stressful environment.
Either be a very small shop or like
whatever it may be, they're living in extremely stressful environments. If you were to put yourself in that situation, imagine if you were in a cage and then somebody just keeps coming and taking your friends and chopping their heads off right in front of you, you would be terrified. Rightly so. So is the chicken, because it knows it's going to die. And now that stress is inside the body of the chicken, because while you might consider stress or whatever as just these ideas and concepts, biologically they have some correlation, which is that when you are stressed out, you will have a certain level of cortisol, you will have a certain level of adrenaline, and have a certain level of different kinds of chemical compounds inside your body, which is causing that feeling. But now evolution does not create new things, it's like, so it builds on itself. So if there's cortisol in the chicken, you are also running on the similar, or rather the same, it's like chemicals.
The same chemicals are inside your body. Like
Yes, yes. So when you eat that, it's like no wonder you get stressed out and then you get anxious and depressed and things like that, because you're eating those things. And on top of it, it's like also most of these animals these days are fed like a large amount of antibiotics, because they live in such horrible conditions that they get all kinds of infectious diseases, and then they're like dying and whatever. So just to artificially keep them alive and also to boost the rate of their growth, they are fed like a whole host of antibiotics and all kinds of horrible things, which obviously stays inside the system of that creature, and then when you eat it, it kind of integrates into your body, right? So it's pretty much a no-brainer to, at least for me, to eat love rather than to eat suffering.
Cool. But again, the base concept of consciousness with non-veg, like how does this balance together? I got the whole idea of how this works, but if somebody is doing it in terms of energy, like we need energy to keep ourselves up there also, right?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So if it's energy, when people are eating non-veg, definitely the energy will drop down, and psychologically you cannot keep up. Even though if you try and push yourself to be there, it won't keep up, right? I mean, I'm just asking, is that how it is, or is it doable? Is it hackable? I'm just asking.
See, the thing is, there is this other thing that I've come across in spirituality, which is that people look for all kinds of esoteric experiences and equate that with spirituality. Having an altered experience of your mind, and then they feel like, it's like, now that is a spiritual experience. But truly what happens in this case is something insidious happens, which is that the ego tends to integrate that experience into itself and creates this feeling that I have had this experience, right? And this I gets reinforced, whatever it may be. Like you might have had an experience of your energy body, or you might have had a out of body experience, or like maybe an astral projection or whatever. And then what this does is, rather than making you question the nature of self and the nature of reality, in many cases it tends to reinforce the I, that I have had this experience, right, and gives you a spiritual ego.
But
right?
That again goes to the power, right, when it becomes I.
Exactly.
Cool.
Because I would say the highest form of evolution is to evolve in love. And somebody who is incapable of seeing the suffering that they are causing to a fellow being on this planet, and then says that they are somehow evolved being, is not evolved at all. It's just somebody who is living in their power center and thinks that just because they had some sort of an experience is somehow better than everybody else, which is another thing that you see in, say, a lot of these spiritual people, so called.
The gurus and
It's like the guru complex. Like now you are a guruji, so you are somehow better than everybody else, and you are going on giving sermons to people. But what you are doing ultimately is to create separation. Like you put yourself on a pedestal and everybody is below you,
yeah,
which is the opposite of what you want.
cool. That kind of great. So I have seen like certain spiritual people who kind of don't recommend it, but they do some practices in terms of spirituality, that there are like so many practices inside spirituality itself. So, but they kind of okay with eating non-veg. I mean, I still don't get it, because with my experiences, I feel nothing is good about it. I mean, like, other than the taste or the sensation that is creating this desire to eat them, to put it in your stomach. I'm sure like even the people who are eating it, they definitely don't want to kill it. If you give the chicken to them and you go cut it yourself and do the things and process yourself, I'm sure like a lot of people won't do it. It's being done somewhere, it's being like, it's It's not in your eye, it's happening somewhere. You don't take credit for the suffering or whatever. But these people are kind of okay. You can kind of eat it. Kind of in the sense you can eat like 10%, 5%, even it's like 1%. How do they come to that conclusion? It's okayable, it's agreeable when it comes to the spiritual people. I kind of don't get this idea. How does this complement in terms of love? I mean, once you get it there, you should be able to love that as well, right? When we talk about love, it's like everything and everyone. So when it's everything, it's plants, animals, and etc. things that is in this planet. So I kind of get to have these conversations with people who are into spirituality and they have this idea about non-veg. It's okay. I mean, like, how come? Is it even doable or stuff? But these people do have the practice of spirituality. I mean, like, I really don't know how to balance these two ideas.
Like, what do you mean by the practice of spirituality?
Practice in the sense, let's say energy practices. Let's say there are healers or this or that. Like, they are kind of, they definitely don't go with the food. Like, in my experience, I would say when you go to spirituality, the food is the very primal thing. It's the entry point. You start with that and then you go from that point. But the way they define it is like you do these practices and food is like, okay, you kind of don't eat much non-veg, but okay, non-veg is fine. I mean, like, really, I mean, how does this work?
So I would say that this is like, maybe calling it pseudo spirituality would be a bit extreme, but this is unfortunate spirituality, maybe, you know. It's like self-deceptive spirituality, which is where you're still in your power center, but you somehow feel like you're a spiritual being, because it's the incapacity to empathize, the incapacity to see some things which are just right there. Like, you don't need to go off into some esoteric dimensions to realize that, yeah, of course, this creature is suffering immensely. You don't need it. It's like, but having said that, it's you need to understand that it's possible to have like different kinds of experiences if you like try some different methods. It's not so hard. Like, there are so many different kinds of breathing techniques where if you experiment with it, you will have a certain kind of an experience where it's, let's just say, a non-normal experience. Like, everybody is used to a normal state of reality where you're, you know, you are you, having a sense of self in a certain manner. And if you do a certain kind of a practice, you will have an altered experience, right? But having said that, having had the altered experience, what are the implications of that altered experience on your life? For many people, they miss it. They miss the most fundamental point, which is to question the nature of reality, the nature of self, like who you really are, is what this experience should kind of give you. Because once you've had this experience of having a perception of reality which is extremely different from what you normally have, it opens up this possibility that, okay, there are many different ways in which this can be interpreted, which kind of diminishes the rigidity with which you hold on to this reality as being serious and real and like the most important thing. So, which is what it should do for you. But instead of doing that, what it does in many cases is, as I said, it tends to reinforce the ego, that I have been practicing with all of these practices for like a decade now, and at the end of the decade, now I have reached some special status. And now you can give this status a name, and then that feeds the ego even more, right? But truly, that is not an evolution at all.
That's just the power center is just shifting inside its own cells.
Yes, yes. Because now what this person is doing is they're playing the same game. It's like somebody plays the game of trying to become the vice president of some big corporation, and then as the vice president, then you have enough money to buy yourself like a Mercedes something, and then this materialistic goodie is used to feed your ego, which is what it is. Now you drive around in your Mercedes, you put the pictures on Instagram or whatever, you go for a vacation to some exotic location, and in that exotic location some people are serving some coconuts to you in like some special straw and all that stuff. But truly coconuts are being served here as well. If you are a mature being, you see coconut as a coconut. It's irrelevant that you're facing the beach and then you're lying down and then somebody in some exotic clothes is coming to serve you the coconut, and then because you don't care. As a mature being, you see reality for what it is. It's that when you drink the coconut water, it goes inside, it becomes a part of you. You integrate that into yourself. Doesn't really matter whether you're drinking it by the side of the road or in some sort of a resort or something like that, right? And what these spiritual people do is they're like, in many cases, they're doing the exact same thing. Now, instead of having a Mercedes, now they have a spiritual Mercedes, which is that it's some sort of a status or some sort of an experience that they're after. But it's still a goal. It's like they're trying to get somewhere, do something, and then reach a state where they're saying that, okay, now this is under my belt, now I have pulled this off, right? It's like a thing that you have, right? But it's the same game that they're playing.